Alright, so we're working on our collision, and I wanted to do another example of another type of game. We have Breakout, which I used in the very beginning, and then we did a platformer, and we got into the details of that and made it so you could land on a platform, or walk off, or jump and hit your head from below. And that got to the stage where it worked, and then it got to the stage where we actually made it more efficient and more amenable to future changes. So I did that same thing with the Breakout game, and I may have showed you this in a comment. For some people, I gave them a individual feedback with some examples. But what we did is we took the Breakout game that we had, it's loading now, and made it so that the bricks are in a list, and I made 9 of them, but it can be whatever. And then you put them in a list, and then whenever the ball is moving, it can just say, hey, are we touching anything in the list? And it gets back a yes or no. Then the ball doesn't have to know where the bricks are or what they're called or what their status is. It can just ask one question, hey, am I anywhere in the list? And it looks something like this. What I did to improve it from the last version was I actually gave it 2 possibilities, so it doesn't get back a yes or no. It says, oh, are we bouncing horizontally or are we bouncing vertically? So if you hit the side, that'll trigger a correct result. And then what it does is it reverses its y velocity or its x velocity, and then it tells the object, which is whatever one in the list, to do the die function. And in that, you look at the brick. Remember, we're keeping everything self-contained, so the ball doesn't have to know what the bricks are doing, and the ball doesn't destroy the brick. It just tells the brick, hey, you, go through your die function, which is actually incredibly simple. It just removes it from the list and then hides so that it's faded into the background, and the ball can move through that space in future versions. Therefore, it disappears not only from the visuals but from the calculations that it has to make. So this collide got a little extra beefy, and I know it's not very pretty. I want to make it so some of these can be combined into one thing, but this is like, oh, if it hits from below, if it hits from above, if it's from left, if it's from right. So I can make that a little more efficient, or I could start to use the built-in Pygame collision stuff. I just kind of thought it'd be nice to make our own from scratch in order to see that it's not crazy. Like, even if we use the Pygame collision, it's really just doing the same stuff as this. It's like, okay, what are the points in this object and what are the points in this object? And do any of them, if you were drawing a graph, like an inequality type graph, hey, look at that, it finally loaded. So it bounces, and bada bing, bada boom, it's bouncing off the side, and it moves through the space that used to have a brick because it's removed from the list, so it's no longer checking. Okay, that's great, right? It loaded a little weird on the window, but you can see there's the paddle, and you can move the paddle, but it doesn't matter. For this test version, I made it bounce off the bottom no matter what, so that we can test it without having to accurately follow our guy around. Anyway, now let's turn it into a new game. I want to turn it into a Space Invaders type game, a shoot 'em up, a shmup, as they say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go hit fork, and it'll make a copy of this that we are going to mess with. And I'm going to hit run first in order to go through all that loading stuff. And then I'm going to start thinking about what we're going to change. And we're not going to change a whole lot. I mean, most of this code is still there from the original Pong game we made a couple months ago, and then I changed it into Breakout, and in another example I changed it into a platformer. But a lot of it, like all this stuff, well, I changed this a little bit because the Replit preview window looks different now, but most of this stuff is exactly the same. Most of this stuff is exactly the same. This is all the same as it was, I believe. I just changed it from Y to X because the paddle was on the bottom. And that's why I used this one to copy, because our Space Invaders ship is going to be on the bottom. But otherwise we could have done the Pong or something else. Okay, so what we've got is the bricks are sort of taking the place of our enemies. Later we'll change it into enemies, and then we'll make it so that like they move and they shoot at us and all that good stuff. But at first I want to do something that's where's our little guy here, kind of like the Breakout, except you're shooting straight, no X velocity, just Y, and whenever it hits the thing, the brick disappears like it currently does, and the ball disappears, and then you can shoot again. And later we'll make it where you can shoot and have multiple bullets on the screen at the same time, but this current one is just going to have one, just to make it easy. And then we'll go through a few other little things, like making it shoot from the paddle instead of just from whatever point it spawns. So what are we going to do? I'm going to do one little thing, which is to make a list of our bullets. I'm going to call it bullet list, which is only going to have one thing, and the thing is called ball play, because that, stretching all the way back to Pong, that was the name of our ball. We'll change it, of course, and we'll add more in the list, but right now it'll just be one, because that just makes it easy for setting us up for the future. And one thing I'm going to do right away is make it so that in here, this is going to do can't type. This is going to do each one in the list is going to get refreshed every frame, but also only the ones in the list. So like if it hits a brick or if it hits an enemy, then it disappears from the list, so it doesn't continue moving. That's going to help us in two ways. It's going to make it to where it gets all the ones we need, which in the future will be more than one, and it gets only the ones we need, which in this version will be sometimes 0. So I'm putting it in the loop because it changes. The brick stuff is outside the loop because they get drawn once and they only have to disappear. They never get redrawn. You know, that might change if we get to, I'm thinking about like in Breakout, you might like redraw it as a cracked version after it gets hit once, and then it really disappears after the second hit or something like that. Space Invaders version 1.0, it might even be like less than 1, but we'll see. So that's going to be, it's going to give us loading again. That's going to be what we got. So our ball goes into the list of bullets, and so we right away want to do something very similar to the bricks. When the bricks get hit in Breakout, they disappear, and so it's going to be the same thing when a ball hits the thing. It's going to do its die function, which is to remove itself from the list and hide so that it's not there on the screen, you know. Because remember, there's always that dichotomy. You can be on the screen, like painted as a pixel on the visual canvas, even if it's removed from the code stuff, or you could be moving through the code even if you're not visually there. So we want to keep in mind that those are different things. So the paddle is going to have, not the paddle, what am I doing? The ball, which we might change that to bullet or something, is going to have a die function, and it's going to remove itself from the bullet list, and then it's going to hide itself. So when does that get called? It gets called right in here when it hits. When the object, which is the brick, dies, the self will also die. That sounds like some philosophy or something, the self will also die. Like we're doing existentialism. This is gonna get cut, this line here, because it doesn't bounce anymore. It doesn't start in a new direction, it just disappears. And you might notice I just cut the one for X because it's never going to hit anything on the side. The Space Invaders bullet is going to go straight up, or later when they shoot at us, it's going to go straight down. But it's never going to be moving left to right, or even diagonally with a left to right component. So that means you can also cut this whole guy. Whoop, 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 whoop. So that means when you collide with a brick, it's going to remove the ball from the list and hide it, and it's going to remove the object from the list and hide it. So that's not the whole thing, but let's hit run and see what happens. Oh, it lost our bounce on the bottom. It doesn't bounce off the bottom anymore. So let's make it to where that doesn't matter. Let's give it a velocity going up toward the bricks from our initial start. We're not shooting it yet, it's just moving. So where is that? That is in the creation right here. We're going to make the x velocity 0. It's not going right to left. We're going to make the y velocity negative, which I know that sounds weird. The way they do it is the numbers start at the top and then they go up. I was going to say higher, but it's not visually higher. It's lower on the screen, but you know what I mean. So now when I hit run, it's going to have the ball going up and it's going to hit the boop. But it's still on screen because something must be wrong with the hide thing. It's probably hiding too late. Like it draws it once more and then it's gone. You know, like it's actually gone from the list and it wouldn't draw it anymore, but it's drawing it one more time on the little guy here. So it's probably right here. I'm going to make it say if self in bullet list, then self show. That's not great. I would rather rearrange these to make it where that doesn't need to exist. Because whenever you add like weird exceptions like this, it just makes it less elegant. You know, I could probably move this up here. I don't know. For now, let's try this. Hit run, see if it disappears. Oh, okay. So it disappears, and not only that, but we see that it's not affecting these. Like if it kept going, even if it was invisible and these were going away, which happened in my previous attempt, then we would know that it was still moving in the code, even if it wasn't moving on the screen. So now we're going to make it so that we can shoot another one from the paddle, which will later turn into a spaceship and all that stuff. We're going to make it so that when we hit spacebar, it will start moving, just like it already does, and go through all the stuff. So in the paddle, it's going to have a function for that. Okay, I like to make lots of little functions and not. I could keep beefing up this update thing and just have like a paragraph for one thing, a paragraph for another, and I could label them with comments. But you know, sometimes you want to call them from other sections, and if I had it all in update, I couldn't tell it to just call up one spot, one part of it. I would have to, you know, separate that out. So I'm going to give it a shoot, and it's going to say when you do this, it's going to first of all, if you do it when the bullet is already out there, nothing happens. Okay. Later, we can make it where if you have multiple shots going, you can keep adding them. But for now, we've got one ball, and there's only one ball. I don't want to make it so that it like if it was halfway up the screen and you tried to shoot again, then it would disappear and restart at your ship. I want it to keep going. So If you hit shoot and it's already out there, nothing happens. So if I'm already like thinking this is going to work, but it won't work in the most beautiful way. If the ball is in a list, then nothing. And if it's not, then stuff happens. So the ball, I can already tell that this should be in the ball, like instead of in the paddle, you know? So we should make it in there. Whoop. And instead of shoot, I'm going to call this launch because it's kind of like it's starting. I don't know. I guess either one's fine. If self is in the list, this also means that we're not using the name. The name is always a bad idea because it only applies to that one. If we make this for the ball, then it works whatever ball it is. If we create more, which we will, then we won't have to like rewrite it or add new versions or whatever. It's just, you know, strong. It applies to all of them. And they all inherit that from the class. So if it's not in the list, then it goes to the paddle. It like goes to that spot and then it starts moving up. So self.x equals paddle.x. Nah, we don't want that. We don't want it to use attributes of another object. We want it to get them sent there from that object. So let's make one. So this is going to have a shoot, and it's going to say dot launch. This is not perfect, but we'll see. It's going to send self.x to the ball and say, hey, this is where you're starting. So the ball doesn't have to like get that, or it doesn't have to reach into the paddle and like figure out what's going on. So the self.x equals the x that gets sent from the paddle, and the ball starts moving. Well, we got to make the y as well. The y, the paddle doesn't have a y. I mean, it does, but it's not like named that. Let's just say height minus border, and then let's say, which normally that would have bounce, but we took out all the bounce stuff in here. And then let's say the velocity, probably the same. We don't have to do anything with the velocity because it's always moving up. Later, when we have our guys shooting up and the other guys shooting down, then we'll have to make something about velocity. Let's see if that works. Well, it probably does, but it never gets called. So let's do the spacebar thing. So this key input from moving left and right, we're going to take that same idea and put it in here. And I think spacebar is called space. And then we don't need that. I had left and A or right and D because a lot of people use their left hand, the WASD stuff. So, here we go. Okay, so that's something, right? And I think that would actually work. It's not the... Let me see what I did when I had a little trial run of this. That'll work, fine. Doesn't need this part. This will say, hey, when I hit spacebar, it tells the ball to launch from the spot that it is, and then the ball If there's already a ball out there, then it won't do anything. But if not, then it'll start at that spot, start moving up. Let's see if that works. That was the one that's automatic. No, why is it not? Probably because I forgot to put that in the action. Yeah. Self.shoot needs to get called in the update function, because this is actually what happens and everything else is just supplements for that, you know. Okay. Oh. Hang on. I'm going to run it again because I got that window out of alignment thing. So there's the one. If I hit spacebar, it's not happening. Why is that? I'm not getting errors, by the way. It's just not doing what I want it to do. So what's going on? So it says if it's space, and it could be that I used the wrong name. It might be a different code for that spacebar key, but I think it would have said an error if I put something that doesn't mean anything. And then it launches. Oh. Maybe I give it a velocity? No, that wouldn't matter because it's not even on the screen. What do I need here? What do I need? Oh, I have to add it back into the list. That's the key. So I'm going to go bullet list dot append, which means add it onto the end. Lists are in order, so we don't really need them to be in order. It might be better to use a different Python thing called a dictionary, but lists are so easy that I default to them a lot. So let's go append self. Now it should work, right? Boom. Okay. Now if I hit spacebar, let me. Yeah, it'll shoot. Whoop, shoot. Whoop. It's coming out of the side. Because I don't know if you remember, in our original version of Pong, the x coordinate for the paddle was like the middle of it. You know, it's kind of annoying because then you'd have to go like, okay, the width is that thing plus half in one direction and then half in the other direction. And I took that off, but of course it has consequences, which is like, if we want our thing to come out of the middle of the guy, then let's have the paddle just send a real useful number. So it should come out of the middle. Hey, look at that. Beautiful. So now when I'm hitting spacebar and it's already out there, nothing happens. In a future version, oh, look at that. It kind of sliced off a bit if it wasn't quite. Oh, no, it never disappeared because it went off screen. So that is a little bit of an issue because the hitbox, you know, like the theoretical area that actually gets counted, is only in the center of the, it's only a thin slice in the center of the ball because it uses the middle of it. So we should do something about that so that it can't overlap in a weird way. But this is pretty good, right? For a basic version, all we have to do is fix the hitbox, add the ability to shoot multiple versions, which you add them to the list, and then at any time, at any particular instant, you'll be displaying the ones that are on the list, and you'll be checking through those to see if they're hitting stuff. And when it's off screen or when it hits a guy, then you can take it off the list. And you go from there. Could be some good stuff. And then the enemies, we can make them move, make them shoot at us, make them die or leave or create, and it'll be the same thing. You have a list, you have them do their functions, and at any particular instant, the ones that are on the list are the ones who get drawn, get to move and get checked for collision and all that stuff, and then when they die or move off screen, then they disappear from the list. and they can pop back up. So it's kind of like whenever one dies and then another is created, you're not making a new one. You're just using that same one, teleporting it to a new place. We're gonna make some progress, and that'll be a good start. Sounds good.